Hello, my name is Roy Poyan, and I'm the Director of Families Impacted by Opioids. I want to thank you for joining us for this next episode of Fentanyl and Families in Harm's Way. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about a topic that many of us would rather not talk to others about or face with the people we love. It's suicide, it's suicide prevention. Now, when we're dealing with the instability of substance use disorders in the family, it's very hard to gauge how that is affecting the other members of the family. Some will just say that's that person's problem, not mine. We live separate lives. I wish them the best. Others will put themselves in their shoes, in this person's shoes, and think, I would hate to be him. This is how I would feel. I would feel terrible. Others might feel like, I love him, I care about him. And most people do feel this way. And I want to do whatever I can to help that person. But these thoughts start to maturate, and then they're filtered with other thoughts that the individual has, and their own experiences. And this may be not so good a thing that's taking place regarding the substance use disorders, because now they start to consider what they can or can't do with their life. And the next thing you know, they are possibly thinking that in order for them to get out of this feeling in this situation, suicide is plausible. So when we find ourselves in an environment where communication is less, isolation is almost preferred, but in both cases, communication and isolation are the worst things you can be doing for yourself when it comes to substance use disorders, for the family members as well as the one that's misusing substances. So we want you to start to get comfortable with the idea that it's okay to ask somebody, have you been thinking about suicide? Have you been thinking about hurting yourself or hurting others, or taking your life? And you might say, oh, I wouldn't want to say that. That's almost to insinuate that I don't trust them or that I think they're weak. Or you won't feel that way afterwards. You'll think, I should have asked. And this is what we hear all the time in these types of situations. So we're suggesting to you now that take the time to learn how to have a dialogue, an open, trusting, caring dialogue with everybody that's involved. Kind of do a let's check in with each other every now and then and make sure that that much is known to each of us, and let's be honest with each other, because that's the only way we can help, is if you let us in, and we won't abuse that privilege. So in order to do this, it's going to take more than this session. Let's go to the family table, let's open this up, let it breathe. And for yourself, you can determine, what's the best approach for this. We'll give you some tools that you can look at, but you want to further develop your understanding, your comfort with the idea that suicide is preventable if prevention is used. So you got to know what the prevention skill sets are and tools, and you have to use them. So that's where we're going to take this session. But by no means, this is just the beginning for this particular issue for yourself in understanding and using it. Thank you for joining us at the family table again. And what we're going to do is we're going to take apart a topic in order to let it exist. And we want it to exist because it's preventative, and we need to get comfortable with it. We want to have it around us a lot, but not in a way that it controls our thought. Suicide prevention is something that is so real, it's almost surreal. It's difficult for those that are not in the situation to think that any one situation could bring us to the resolve that that kind of action is the only reasonable one. because we can think of so many other ways not to make that the reasonable one. But what we have to understand is we're not them, and that's important. Number two, as frightening as it may be for us, we need to understand they have the ability to do this. And it can be done at any time, at any place, and we very much likely cannot stop them. If this is something that they are determined and will do, it's not going to be a situation where later we're going to likely be able to realistically say, I should have been able to stop it. The reality is, in prevention, you need to understand you cannot stop this from happening if this is what's going to happen. Your efforts for prevention are yours to show that you care. And by not taking those steps is almost a contribution. In terms of, you might have had the opportunity to do something that was very uncomfortable for you, not for them, and then avoid doing it. So I'd like for us to say to ourselves, I'm not going to allow myself that luxury, ever. And if presented with this as my understanding, I will step up to the plate. That resolution, that commitment, I'm asking that you make here, right now. If we were in church, I'd say, come on down and, give it up to the Lord. The fact is, I'm saying to you, come on down and commit now, so that when you do see this, you are prepared to offer a preventative way of responding in order to help this person understand that there are choices. And that's maybe one of them, but it's not the best one. It's not the most realistic one. So what is your best resource when it comes to suicide prevention? It is make the call, okay? And then once you're connected, ask them, what do I do? On the other end of the call are extremely professional people. They know exactly how to tell you over the phone what you can do. And what they're going to tell you works. So when they suggest that you do something, do it with the same commitment as though they were there doing it with you. Don't be concerned, it's just me and I don't know what I'm doing. That's a given. None of us do. But the fact is, I just this person. This isn't something that they are experienced in, committing suicide. None of us do, on either side of this conversation. So yours is as good as any other's in terms of what gets stated and done. But the statement that you make, if given to you, make sure you state it the way they told you to state it, because it's probably the type of statement that's most effective. So when we start to look at expressions of death, we start to say, oh my gosh, I'd rather not. Now you're going to change your mind. I want you to tell me about this, okay? Expressions of feeling, of being trapped. Well, maybe we have our own feelings about that. Maybe we've been trapped before. We don't want to visit that. It makes us have to visit things that we're kind of scared, it makes us uneasy about. I want you, and I do. I want anybody who's thinking about committing suicide to talk about it with me. Okay, it's okay. And I feel the same way about them feeling trapped and they have no other alternative other than to commit suicide. I want you to talk to me about that. I'm available. It's not because I'm a board-certified mental health coach or a chemical dependency counselor. I didn't need those in order for me to feel this way. This is like empathy on steroids. In a sense, it's our most natural, most human core. We care so much about each other because of the love that's inside of us that, of course, if somebody was thinking about committing suicide, almost all of us would sit there and say, take time and tell me about that. Because when they start to hear themselves talk, they'll start to realize that doesn't make sense. And the more they talk, the more they'll realize that there are other alternatives. And those alternatives will become real because they themselves will have said that in their kind of orating what they're thinking.
they then get to take a look at, as it's now on the table and exposed, is that really the way I feel? So when they have reckless behavior, these are kind of signs of that they could be thinking along that line. Now that doesn't mean that everybody that acts out is thinking about that. Let's be mature about how we're approaching this. Fact is, reckless means really reckless, meaning, like suicidal type reckless. So we do start to see things that might lead us down the thought of severity. And, if they used to do, like, they're an avid golfer and now you can't even get them out of his bedroom, that's a problem. They might be on the trail, maybe not immediately, but it certainly is something. They're not sleeping well. They're heavily into alcohol or drugs. They're always irritable. I mean, not just irritable, angry. They're just extremely irritable. And they have this sense of hopelessness about them. This is the kind of profile that you need to, I'm kind of noticing these things. And, I'm not a psychologist, but I'm in your life and I care. So I've taken at least this much, which, by the way, this is just the very, very beginning of learning how to be available, to be a preventive nature for somebody that is thinking about suicide. And to be honest with you, in some form, a little or a lot of us have thought about suicide. Probably scared us and we stopped thinking about it, but the thought has crossed our mind at some point in our lives. So if at an immediate risk, then you call your local helpline. You should know what your county local helpline is. It's usually a 4-digit number. Sometimes it's a text, but the national one is 800-273-8255. Okay, it's a 24/7 line, and if you call it, they'll be there. If you or anybody in the household owns a gun, owns a violent type looking knife, and a dangerous weapon, and you think that there's an idolation, they're romancing the idea, then, collect those things and get them into a place that, they're not available to just accidentally run into. Make sure that if you have a child, they're not left alone in this person's presence. Don't make a big deal about it, but, just be sure that you're making the people around this person safe. Because if you're aware of it and it's true, then you'll regret the fact that you didn't later, should this involve them also. So having suicidal thoughts, take anything they say about suicide, take it seriously. If they bring up the word suicide, I think I should kill myself. Don't sit there and say, oh, Nancy, I can do that. Don't do that, okay? Because that's what society, and that's what we've always done. And that's how we end up watching them and regretting it later that we didn't realize that they were serious. If they mention suicide, ask them the questions. Have you thought much about that? Okay? Tell me what your thoughts are regarding that. Do you have a plan to see this through? What would you be using to do this with? Are you available to talk some more about this? Can I involve somebody who can, help us to have a better conversation? Because this is worth talking about. You're giving them permission to accept that it's safe for them to talk about suicide in front of you, that you're not uncomfortable with it, although I'm sure you are. I know I am, and I would be. But that, you're saying to yourself, I'll put that aside. In order to create a preventative nature to this relationship, to this environment at this time, I'll put my own fears aside and allow myself. Because today you said to us, to yourself, I am available to talk to anyone about their statement, I'm thinking about killing myself, okay? You have to get comfortable with that. And in the area of substance use disorders, that might not come from them, the one that's abusing. It might come from his sister. She may feel so trapped in her world and without any choices, and being a young person, not overly developed or finished developed mind, she may not have the coping skills and understand how to handle that. She herself may think about hurting herself, and she won't likely bring that up to you. but you may start to see the things we had mentioned in the study guide. So do take the time to tell yourself that you're now, for your forward, available to talk to anybody about the topic of them considering killing themselves, harming themselves, or harming others, because all of those kind of group together. When we start to look at the suicide actions, the feelings, what are the changes, they'll express hopelessness about the future. And these are really like exaggerated statements about hopelessness. These aren't just, I think I'm gonna have a bad day tomorrow, my boss expects a report, and I don't have it ready. That's not what we're talking about. Actions, they're displaying an overwhelming pain. I mean, it's overwhelming pain and distress. Showing worrisome behaviors are clues that there's marked changes in the way that they're thinking. They tend to include withdrawing and from friends and situations that normally they'd be very comfortable in. Angry, even hostility is a sign that suicide isn't imminent, meaning it's going to happen, but it may be that they're thinking about it, or their thoughts of choices are narrowing. And so threats, anything that's in writing or talked about, a plan that you might have picked up, they write themselves a note and you happen to stumble across it and it says, I feel like killing myself, act on it, okay? So always be aware that somebody may be thinking along that line, and when you see it, don't pass it over. Treat it as it's real, because it very much probably is real. At least it is for that person at that moment, at that time. They may not feel the same way tomorrow morning, but they did feel about it then, and it still requires them to talk about it. Oh, well, that's just the way I felt yesterday. I don't feel that way today. Well, okay, time out. It was something that you feel. Let's spend some time and discuss what this really is for you. Do you mind if we talk more about that? And more than likely, they'll say yes. They actually want to talk about it. Most of people that are thinking about suicide, it's the fact that they've isolated themselves and their thought life has gotten so narrowed that a fresh idea might be exactly what they're looking for. You're not a therapist. You're not going to talk them off, completely off the ledge, but you can at least get them back from the idea that they're going to, take the next step. And that in itself is everything in terms of prevention. Prevention can start from just a minor statement to what is obviously a major commitment towards acting it out. So once again, if you're in this situation, you need to determine a solution and develop a decision and design a plan of action of what you're going to do. Use your coping skills when it comes to suicide prevention. Know what you're going to do now that today, right now, changes how you look at this devastating decision. And for the people that have committed suicide and then it wasn't successful, a lot of them have said, boy, after I had started to do it, I thought to myself, this is the worst thing I ever could have chosen. So, it's kind of like hindsight. Well, fortunately, some of them have had the ability to share their hindsight. It's almost 100%. I didn't want to do this. I really did not want to do this. They're going to tell you at the time that they do want to do this. But what they're really saying is, help me, help me, help me. So be ready to help. The first step is to listen. And actually, along with listening, make the call immediately and get advice on what to do. Don't try and do this by yourself. Thank you for taking the time to review this, and good luck in this journey of being accepting to suicide. Be comfortable with it, and then be ready to respond to it, and don't ignore the signs when you see it. Hello, I want to thank you for continuing to view our episode. And we're now going to work into the area of the 3Ds. This is an important characteristic for the family to develop skills in. And we'll start by taking the time to look at an issue and then determine the issues based on the area of determining a solution, developing a decision, and designing a plan of action. By using your Module 3 workbook and going to a specific issue, you'll be able to find that the first step in that 3D skill set is the FTR, the Family Transformational Model. And the Family Transformational Model is a set-up way, each time the same way, that we will take 5 categories to look at in determining a solution. And each category is going to have 3 questions. So let's get started. The first is to define the issue. Naturally, we'll want to know what the issue is. The word issue is really problem, but we're saying the word issue is, the reason we're saying the word issue is it's just a little bit easier to digest, because it's not always a problem. Sometimes it's just something that's happening, and we need to determine a solution to it. The next question is, how does the issue impact the family? We need to know that. We need to know we have an issue, that's fine. The issues can exist, but if it's impacting the family, in what way is it impacting the family? And then what steps can the family take to prepare and then respond to the issue? That's very important for us to know. The fact is that this issue exists and it's impacting the family. We tend to believe maybe there was something we could have done to kind of get ready for it. And if there was, then we would want to have taken those steps, which is what all these episodes are about. And then who can help assist us and the family in our response? So we want to start to ask ourselves, we know that there's an issue, we know that it's impacting the family, and there are things that we could do to prepare for this, but we're probably going to need a resource, information, another person outside of our family, or maybe one of our family members specifically can use their functionality and contribute. So we want to identify that. And then what should the family expect as their outcome? And kind of a start with the end in mind thought, where we're saying, if we're going to do something, it's going to result in something. So is that result desirable? Is that really what we want? Because if we're going to create a solution, then we want the solution's outcome to be what we expect it would be. So in each of these categories that I just described, 1 through 5, there are 3 questions, and we're going to ask ourselves each of these. Let's go back into the first category, define the issue. Clearly state what happened or what will happen. We want to know very clearly what happened or what's likely to happen. And then write that down. Identify who's involved or who should be involved, and then what would you like to have happen or like to see happen. The third question in every category is going to be used. You'll see how in just a minute. But just remember, the third question in every category, so this question right here, the way you answer it, will be reused. Now the next question is, how is the issue impacting the family? Who in the family exactly is impacted? In what way are they impacted? And then the third question is, what is needed to move forward? And then the third category is, what steps can the family take to prepare and then respond to the issue? The 3 questions again. What needs to be done? And then prioritize that list. Who needs to be involved? And then what will it look like, the third question, what will it look like when completed? Then the 4th category is, who can help and assist the family in their response? The 3 questions are, how to search and organize this organization to help you. In other words, it's not enough that you know you're going to go and introduce yourselves to a treatment center in your community. You want to start to determine, how do I look for them? and organize my way of seeking help, because it might not just be that group alone. You may also need other services to kind of start to create a who can assist us. And it may be many different types of people. What to ask from them, and then what to expect. Remember the third question, what to expect. And then the fifth category is, what should the family expect as their outcome? Well, that has to do a lot with timing. And if it takes a certain amount of time, let's be realistic of what that is. That has something to do with the expense of the involvement, of getting involved in this issue. And then the third question being required changes, our changes as family members, for this response to successfully take place. Now, let's state what our solution is. Hey, this is the great news. You've already developed your solution. By answering each of these three questions, the third question in every category, you'll pull forward now into your statement. So your first sentence of your statement is the third answer in the first category. What would you like to have happen or like to see happen? Well, that becomes your first sentence. So what your first sentence for your solution statement is, what we would like to see happen is, and you just pull your answer from there to here. Do the same thing with the second category. How does the issue impact the family? Using the third question's answer, what is needed for the family to move forward? So now your second sentence is, what's needed to move forward is, and now you're accumulating these answers from these categories, the third question, and it's actually becoming your first sentence, your second sentence, your third sentence, your fourth sentence, and your fifth sentence in your solution statement. So your solution statement is going to sound something like, what we would like to see happen is, and what's needed to move forward will be, and then the third question from the third category, what it will look like when completed will be, and then what we expect will be, and then what's required for us to have a successful response is. Now those are your 5 sentences. You've just constructed your solution. And this is how you go about using a model for creating a solution. For any issue in life you have to face, you can use this as a way of approaching it. Now let's go to the other area, which is the second coping skill, making a decision. Let's make a value-based decision. Let's make a decision each time that kind of balances with what we value most. So first we want to determine, what are our values? Well, the best way to do that is to write down on a piece of paper, what types of things do you as an individual value most? And each member of your family can do this in a kind of a group exercise. And then once you've done that, I value love, I value honesty, I value relationships and sharing. These could all be an individual's 1, 2, 3. Then prioritize them. Which of the 1, 2, 3 is most important? Then have each member of the family do the same thing. And then you can sit there and say to the family, what was your number 1? What was your number 2? What was your number 1? What was your number 1? What was your number 1? And then what was your 2? What was your 2? What was your 3? What was your 3? And where you start to see many people in the family say, well, my number 1 is relationships, my number 2 was trust, and my number 3 was love. Well, then you talk to another person, they say, well, my number 1 was love, my number 2 was personal expression or confidentiality, or so they mentioned something different, but they did mention love. And then the third member of the family happens to mention love also. You know now that love is a value of the family. So whatever decisions you make, you want to balance it on the fact of, does this disrupt our values? If it does, at least you know that it does, and to what degree. You're calculating that. But at least also you're including, what do we value most? Let's make sure our decisions don't counter that. And now, in the first step, we're going to identify exactly what's happened. And this is, by the way, in your book, okay? And it is for each of the episodes. Now, identify exactly what's happened what happened, how did it happen, who did it happen to. Then the second step is analyze the situation, assess the problem, identify the problem, and in what areas did the problem create an impact. You're writing all of these down. The third step of that the third step in the decision-making model is what is the number of one contributing factor? What is causing this issue to take place? You need to know that before you make a decision. The fourth step is, now that you know the number one factor, you need to go out and find out what information there is about this. Your primary source, you're going to go to the actual person or organization that's involved with this and ask them, what is this issue, and help us to understand it better. The secondary source would be somebody's telling you this happened, or somebody suggests that you should do something a certain way, and it's coming from somebody else other than the primary source. It could be an article, a clinical paper. These are all secondary sources, and you gather them and you make them part of your primary, secondary information gathering. The third area that you look at is your gut. What does your gut, because that's often where our faith comes in, and other things that are very important when making decisions get included. So trust your gut is what we're saying in the decision-making process. The fifth step in making a good quality decision is where you're taking a criteria and saying, let's take what we're going to make a decision about and let's balance it on the criteria to make sure that we're covering all of our bases. And this will ensure safety of your loved one. Is safety a part of what's being considered? And do we have the resources that are needed to do the decision we're looking at? And then, do we understand the timetable? Is it realistic? And do we understand the negative impacts? Because every decision has a positive and negative. Well, identify what the negative outcomes might be so that you can weight the factor of, is this a good decision? And then, would you do this would you ask others to do this if they were doing it for you? Meaning it was done for you or to you. Is this still a good decision? These are all areas that you want to take a look at. The third coping skill is in the area of the family plan of action. And everybody could say, well, Roy, listen, we're just going to go out and do it. Well, it's going to get done a lot more effectively. I want to warn you that the addiction industry is not organized. And then again, either is the family. So you're taking two disorganized organizations and you're putting them together. So a plan is a very good idea. The other factor is you're going to more than likely require the assistance of a lot of different groups. And as time goes by, those groups are going to change. And now it's a whole new set of groups that you're dealing with. When you're at the hospital, the ER, that's what that is. Then you move over to detox, that's what that is. Then you move over to therapy and treatment, and that lasts for 16 weeks. That's what that is. Then you're looking at sober living, recovery, maybe incarceration, and then reentry, on all that's involved in that. So there's all sorts of reasons why a plan put on paper based on the decision and the information gathering that you've made, based on the solution that you know you want to use, are very good ideas. It all comes together with the plan of action. Then you take the plan of action and you go find a professional to help you. Everything that we've done up to now is to position you to a place where you can be properly assisted and directed and supported. This is what's often missing in the families. This is what exhausts the families. This is where the families get into fights internally on. So, for that reason, we're going to apply the 3D coping skills. Determine a solution. We're going to develop a decision, and we're going to design a plan of action. And we're going to do it each time. I hope this is helpful for you. I'm confident it will be.